gravitational pull. Now, I get a lot of people will be like, well, Christian McCaffrey is great running back, but the quarterback is the one is the most valuable player. I don't know about that. I really don't. I think if we're gonna make the most MVP an MVP award in terms of most valuable player, let's actually make it about the most valuable player. And if we're gonna give it to quarterbacks every year, why the hell do we have a most valuable player award? Why don't you put most valuable quarterback award? Because at this point, it becomes a quarterback driven award, and you're really truly not giving it to the most valuable player in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, for example, the guy mentions Tyreek Hill should be up there in the top 3 in terms of MVP caliber players because of what he's doing for that offense. We've seen him with we've seen the
in that game you just watched, right?
He was
like
out.
him on the field versus him off the field. It was crazy.
It was crazy. You see the difference in Tua Tagovailoa, the run game. You see the way the defenses change their defense to play against the team. So for me, it's just a variety of different things. If we don't have Christian McCaffrey on the field, how do teams defend us? Like you kind of play a little bit more of the pass, or how do you defend us? Because to be honest, looking at everything, Brock Purdy is playing phenomenal. I'm not gonna not say he's not. He is. He's playing really good football. Very efficient football is what he's doing. But in my opinion, I would lean towards Christian McCaffrey because Christian McCaffrey brings so much to the team in terms of the run game. He opens up the pass during the play action. Teams have to respect the run game whenever Christian McCaffrey is on the field. And even when he motions out, teams have to respect Christian McCaffrey. You could say, and I see Niner Bang talking about J.P. Mason also gets good run yards. He does, but I guarantee you, if you had Jordan Mason on the field 90% of the time, you would see teams play the 49ers a lot differently in terms of in the pass game. Would they respect Jordan Mason going out in motion as much as they respect Christian McCaffrey going in motion and during the pass sets?
With your point on that, even and we can kind of drop the article, but I liked the point that it brought up because I felt like it would incite this conversation. But even with your saying, because you're talking about just on the third downs, the attention that Christian McCaffrey brings. But in the article, he even talked about although third down is the most important, according to from his perspective, in like the most important running down, he talked about the 49ers being one of the lowest teams to face third downs, and he said that is because of Christian McCaffrey is keeping them out of those third down situations because he's always sometimes he can be down the field, but most of the time he's just a dump off option on those plays, and because he's had that amazing chemistry with Brock Purdy where when something's not opening up, they can kind of communicate with each other on the fly, and so he's helping them kind of be one of the lower, keeping them out of those situations as much as possible.
Essentially,
so his value is definitely you can't only say his value, talk about his value in that way because he affects so much of the game and even affects the 49ers getting in that situation in the first place.
Absolutely. So. And when you look at it, I would even argue that the most important down in football is first down. When you have a positive play on first down, you're more likely to sustain drives. You're more likely because now if you have a second, let's say you have a first down, right?
Especially for the 49ers, right? I don't mean to interrupt her, but I feel like it must have been a couple of weeks ago when they were finally getting back in their rhythm, where we were seeing that every time that their first down was successful, you felt like they were going to score a touchdown. It was like 2 or 3 games ago where literally they had 6 touchdowns in a row on offensive possessions. And the only times that they weren't scoring touchdowns was when on first down they had a penalty
or a negative play.
Some sort of negative play, like you saw them getting flustered. Luckily, I will say I feel like in the last 2 games they've kind of started to overcome that where they can be kind of down and come back. But for this 49ers team specifically, maybe like I said, not the last 2 games, but when we look at the season as a whole, that first down has been really important in their momentum going forward. And you could kind of look at how they did on first down and say, okay, this is going to be a good drive or it's going to be a bad drive.
We could actually correlate it to the whole NFL though, Ashley, because when you look at it, right, like for example, statistics are super important in the NFL, right? If you have a for example, first and 10, right? You gain 3 to 4 yards. Your next play for 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 6 is much different than a 2nd and 10, right? Second and 10, most defenses are like, okay, boom, it's a passing situation. They need to get 10 yards within the next 2 plays, passing situation. Now you can send a blitz, you can do a lot of other different coverages. It allows you to do many different things when it's a second and 10 versus a second and 5. You can run the ball again on second and 5. So reality is first down is very important. And when you have Christian McCaffrey picking up 5 yards on first down, you're in a situation for a coach to pick you apart because they're averaging in the run game 5 yards a pop. Now I don't have to worry. I could go play action. I could rip you apart play action wise. I do see 909 Bang talk about, well, look what Sam Darnold did in 3 plays. Well, let me also say, did the 49ers game plan for Sam Darnold, or did a game plan for Brock Purdy? Did Kyle Shanahan have a script ready to bring in a quarterback off the bench, ready in the heat of the moment? No. If you have a game plan for a quarterback, it's a much different situation. Your game calls in that situation would be much different for Brock Purdy, for Sam Darnold, for Patrick Mahomes, for any quarterback. You have a different game plan. And that's why coming off the bench, you saw that. It's not because Sam Darnold can't do it. It's because they're in that situation. Your game plan and your play calls were already so in rhythm for Brock Purdy. Come in, you have to figure out a rhythm with the new player. It's not because, oh my God, that quarterback sucks. That quarterback's great. Not how it works, to be honest with you.
Yeah. We'll move past this a little bit. I do want to say, like, this is my dad, but he said no, Brock Purdy didn't do anything in those 3 games he lost. Dad, yes, he did. I do. I mean, I think aside from the Browns game, he actually played fairly well in the majority of those games up until the final quarter, which obviously, if you're grading, I think you and I talked about this. It's like the end of a math test. You give more points to the word problems at the end versus throughout the whole test. But I mean, I don't, and even in that article, he said this is kind of what sucks about the transition from the MVP award being celebrating a player in the league that's having the best season to this, because now it's like, even though it creates for fun discussions, it kind of like you almost have to put down a different player in order to highlight. You have to say, like, well, Brock Purdy actually isn't that responsible for wins in order to make the case that Christian McCaffrey is, instead of just being like, hey, Tyreek Hill is having literally a historic season. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it does kind of suck that it feels like sometimes it's gone from like an award about an appreciation for like a historic player that season to now like debating. I mean, people are even saying and Lamar's been an incredible quarterback, but so far he hasn't really been in the MVP discussion this year. And all of a sudden, since Dak Prescott really isn't in the running, people are saying, okay, well, if Lamar, like, it feels so week to week now that it's more of a quarterback award, because now it feels like, okay, well, if Lamar beats the 49ers, then he'll probably be the MVP. So yeah.
So if you look at it, because what happens is when you make it a quarterback award, right, is essentially you have extreme recency bias, right? So, like, for example, whatever happens from here on out, every other game doesn't matter for a lot of people. Like, well, I don't care. We're at the end of the season. You're a playoff team. You got to be beating these playoff teams or these really good defenses. If not, if you could throw 25 touchdowns before this, if you throw 2 touchdowns the remaining of the season and you're in the top 5 category in terms of touchdowns, voters aren't going to care. They're going to remember the last 5 games of the season. How did you finish? How did you finish those last 5 games of the season? And that's the most important thing. I know we have other topics to get to, so I'll let you go ahead and roll into the next ones because we can sit here and talk about the MVP
I know.
conversation all day.
People in the comments are heated, and I will say I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but I think the point of the article and the reason it's become and it becoming a quarterback award, I have no problem with debating that it shouldn't be taken so literally and that it should just be about which player is having the best season. But I do think if it's literally most valuable, then first of all, Purdy would win no matter what, because you take in consideration his salary. But if you're not taking in consideration his salary, I think it would just go to a quarterback, and then I think it would go to Mahomes. And I think the point of what Bang Bang Niner Gang is saying right here is that without Christian McCaffrey, potentially they would he might add 1 to 3 wins a season, where if you take out the quarterback and put in a backup replacement quarterback, you might, Purdy might be adding in 4 to 5 games.
So
But
if we did that conversation though, then right, because like he does talk about the NFC Championship game, right?
yeah,
What quarterback in the NFL are you going to sign 2 weeks? 2 weeks. I believe that's what Josh Johnson was. Two to 3 weeks to go win you a Super Bowl. Not going to happen, right? Never. That's not going to happen. But if you take away, if we're talking about quarterbacks and wins, right? Let's go take away Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs, right? They don't have great receivers. They have Travis Kelce's been double covered most of the season, bracketed, whatever. Take away him, that team's not a playoff team. That team probably wins 2 games with a great defense. They're the same thing as the Jets, playing different quarterback carousel, great defense, a good run game, shitty team.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, like I said, my conclusion is that if you're taking it the most literally, that it would have to be a quarterback, and then that it would be Patrick Like, I think everyone who's a football fan and like pretty, pays attention could just go, who's the best quarterback in the NFL? Like, what is the most valuable position in the NFL out of all positions? Quarterback. Okay, who is the best
Mm-hmm.
quarterback in the NFL? Patrick Mahomes. And I think people are like, okay, well, we don't actually just want to give it to Mahomes every single year. So they try to change things and make things complicated. Now, I will say, this wasn't okay. Really quick, I do want to say, because you've been gone, I do want to say I felt like, because I want to say a couple weeks ago, I thought that, and we're just really beating this topic to death, but I do find it interesting. I thought that Christian McCaffrey was the MVP. I felt like Kyle Shanahan kind of talked about feeling like Christian McCaffrey was the MVP of the 49ers. I know recently Brock Purdy, and I think maybe all teammates would say this about each other, but Brock Purdy said he thought that the award should go to Christian McCaffrey. I will say, I thought that the last 3 games since the Eagles, um, I have felt like Christian McCaffrey deserved it less, not because I was like, okay, I'd be willing to give it to a running back. I'm saying this like I have any sort of say. But if it was, my NFL MVP award, I was thinking I would give it to a running back, but that running back would have to be the best player on his team every single week, no matter what, in order to deserve that. And I will say, I think that Deebo Samuel has been the best player on the team in the last 3 weeks. And so I think that took away from Christian McCaffrey's MVP like discussion. Because like if you look at the Dolphins, I feel like no matter what, every single game, even though Jalen Waddle is good, it's Tyreek Hill every single time, all the time. I do think since the Eagles game, maybe not last week, I guess that could be debatable, but I think the Eagles game and then the Seahawks game after that, Deebo Samuel was the best player on the team those 2 weeks. Um, while we're
Yeah, the
really quick, I
last
wanted
4 weeks was
to,
crazy though. It's crazy though, Ashley, is the
yeah,
last 4 weeks, right? Since we played Philly. Or yeah, the last was go or actually the first time we played Seattle. What's crazy is Christian McCaffrey is averaging 100 plus yards, right? He's averaging at least one and a half, like 1.5 touchdowns a game. He had 2 against Seattle. He had 1 against Philly. He had um, another 1 against Seattle, and then 2 against Arizona. So like he's averaging over 100 yards like a game, and we're still like, Debo's been balling. That's what I'm more so trying to say is like what Debo's done in the last 4 weeks is crazy, and it's
yeah,
not being talked about because Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy are overshadowing what
he's
he's
so
done in
good.
the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I just wanted to like emphasize what you were saying.
To potentially, and maybe we
Oh,
don't even have to do
you
this
got
in a,
you got some people in the chat calling you
are they
them.
going crazy? Are they going
Oh, the
crazy?
last chat. It's hey, look, you got some Mr.
Actually, you're my
Salazar.
MVP. I'm gonna ignore every single other comment. I know they're really
Doesn't
talking
matter.
about Josh Johnson. I'm not gonna argue with the chat about Josh Johnson. Okay, that was a nightmare. We're all forgetting it. But I do like this one. um,
That's
but
hilarious.
I have 2 ways that I could go with this, but I think that it would be fun while we're debating all these players to point out. I think it was Larry Krueger that I heard talking about this, or maybe he retweeted an article about it.
What that Brandon Ayuk having a midseason still?
Brandon Ayuk, they're all having. I was gonna say they're all having historic seasons. Something like Debo, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, like they're all gonna potentially have 1,000-yard seasons, and that could be something to take away from Brock Purdy because it's like that's incredible. But I'm not even gonna go there. I'm gonna go. Did you know with Debo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and Brock Purdy on the field, the Niners are 18-0. They average 35 points a game, and in those games, Brock Purdy has 40 touchdowns and 4 picks. Isn't that kind of
That's
crazy?
crazy.
So, like, we're debating which one is the MVP, but the cool thing for the 49ers is they have all 3 of them. And when all 3 of them are healthy and in the game, I imagine I'd love to see, I bet Trent Williams is also in there, in all those games. But just, it's a fun thing to talk about. But the 49ers are not angry that they have those players all on their team because that is a recipe for success when they're all healthy.
It's like the stat that I want to say Akash put out about Nick Bosa, like since he's gotten to the 49ers and every game he's played in or something like that, like the record with Nick Bosa, and he was talking about how, yeah, I have to find it, but it was like a crazy record. Like obviously Nick Bosa is the most valuable player on the team with that record, like right, like it's crazy how you actually could skew most stats to make it look like one player is the MVP. Like reality, we can. Like we can make it look like Christian is, Debo is, Brock is. We
This
can make it look like
discussion makes
Trent.
me feel like John Lynch should be executive of the year, to be honest.
I agree. I really agree with coach of the year
If
should be
we're
Kyle
debating, we're
Shanahan.
like, hey, the team is too good. We could
It's
make an
crazy.
MVP conversation for like 5 of the guys. So you definitely have to. That'd be interesting. I'm gonna add that on there. I'm gonna add this to the banner really quick. Do you think that Kyle Shanahan, like we're discussing maybe the flaws with the unwritten rules around NFL MVP. I think there's also unwritten rules around coach of the year conversation. Like it seems to go to the coach that's of the team that had the lowest expectations that then did well, instead of actually the coach of whatever team is performing the best that year, which I kind of do. You know what's interesting? I feel like it would seem more in my head fair, quote unquote, if it was switched. If the MVP of the league, so the player went to like the best player on kind of the worst team, like the player that was helping a quote unquote bad team succeed. So Patrick Mahomes is helping the Chiefs that would definitely not be in playoff contention, potentially go even further than that because he's so good. Where I think the coach of the year should go to the team that's performing the best because they're like responsible for what's that quote? Any coach can make C players play like C players, but can you make your A players perform like A players or something like that?
Okay, I get what you're saying.
Okay.
Essentially, I know
So
what you're trying to
I
say.
think Kyle Shanahan is unfairly not very high up in the